In this video, you will discover why solitude is not weakness, but one of the greatest hidden sources of power. You will understand how silence rebuilds your mind after constant noise, why people fear being alone with themselves, and how isolation can sharpen your thinking, strengthen your emotions, and restore your true identity. You will learn the laws of solitude, the psychology behind silence, and how powerful people use distance and stillness to regain control over their lives. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel, like the video, activate the notification bell, share the video with someone who needs this message, and write in the comments, "Silence is power." Now close the noise around you for a moment and listen carefully. Most people are terrified of silence. The moment life becomes quiet, they rush toward distraction. They open their phones, search for conversations, scroll endlessly, or surround themselves with meaningless noise. Because silence forces a person to confront something they spend their entire lives trying to escape: themselves. Solitude removes the masks. It exposes the thoughts you bury during busy days. It reveals emotional wounds hidden beneath entertainment and social interaction. And that is exactly why solitude is powerful. A person who cannot sit alone with their own mind is easily controlled by the world around them. But a person who learns to be comfortable in silence develops something rare: inner authority. Modern society conditions people to fear isolation. You are constantly told that you must always be connected, always visible, always speaking, always reacting. Silence is treated almost like a defect. If you disappear for a while, people assume something is wrong. But the truth is the opposite. Constant exposure weakens the mind. Endless interaction drains mental clarity. The more noise enters your life, the harder it becomes to hear your real thoughts. Solitude acts like a reset for the human mind. It strips away external influence and allows your deeper intelligence to return. Think about the moments when your mind becomes clearest. It is rarely inside crowds. It is usually during long walks alone, late nights in silence, moments away from chaos, moments when nobody is demanding your attention. In solitude, your thoughts stop competing with the voices of others, and slowly, you begin remembering who you really are beneath the expectations, performances, and pressures of society. One of the first laws of solitude is this: silence reveals truth. Many people spend years building identities based entirely on external validation. Their confidence depends on compliments. Their happiness depends on attention. Their sense of worth depends on how others react to them. But when silence enters their lives, they suddenly feel empty. Why? Because they built themselves around the opinions of others instead of building an inner foundation. Solitude destroys illusions. It forces you to ask difficult questions. What do you actually believe? What do you truly want? Who are you when nobody is watching? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary, because real power begins the moment you stop living as a reflection of other people's expectations. Silence is also a weapon against emotional manipulation. People who cannot tolerate loneliness often stay trapped in unhealthy relationships, toxic friendships, and exhausting social environments simply because they fear being alone. They would rather suffer with others than face silence by themselves. But solitude teaches emotional independence. It teaches you that peace is more valuable than constant company. Once you learn how to enjoy your own presence, you stop begging for attention. You stop tolerating disrespect just to avoid loneliness. You stop chasing people who drain your energy, and that changes everything. Suddenly, your decisions become stronger because they are no longer driven by desperation. There is another law of solitude that most people never understand. Distance creates clarity. When you constantly remain inside noise, drama, arguments, and social pressure, your mind becomes emotionally foggy. You react instead of thinking. You absorb emotions that are not yours. You lose perspective. But when you step away and enter silence, something strange begins to happen. Your mind slows down. Your emotions settle. You start seeing situations more objectively. Problems that once felt overwhelming become understandable. People reveal themselves more clearly. You begin recognizing who genuinely values you and who only values your availability. Solitude sharpens perception. It allows you to observe instead of constantly reacting. Many powerful individuals throughout history understood this principle deeply. Philosophers, leaders, writers, warriors, and visionaries often spent long periods alone. Not because they hated people, but because they understood something society ignores. Creation requires silence. Great ideas rarely emerge from endless distraction. Mental strength is rarely developed inside constant comfort and noise. Solitude becomes a training ground for the mind. In silence, you learn discipline, you learn patience, you learn self control. You begin mastering your impulses instead of becoming a slave to them. And perhaps the most dangerous transformation happens quietly. You stop needing constant validation. This is where true power begins. Because the world loses control over people who no longer depend on external approval. A person addicted to attention can be manipulated easily. Praise controls them, criticism destroys them, rejection weakens them. But a person who has learned solitude becomes emotionally harder to control. They are no longer desperate for acceptance because they already found stability within themselves. This does not mean becoming cold or antisocial. Solitude is not hatred toward humanity. It is selective distance. It is learning when to disconnect from noise in order to reconnect with yourself. Many people confuse solitude with loneliness, but they are not the same thing. Loneliness is emptiness. Solitude is restoration. Loneliness feels like abandonment. Solitude feels like recovery. One destroys energy while the other rebuilds it. And the difference depends entirely on your relationship with yourself. If you hate your own mind, silence becomes torture. But if you learn to understand yourself, silence becomes freedom. Another law of solitude is that silence increases presence. People who speak less often appear more powerful because they are not constantly leaking energy through endless explanation. They observe more carefully, they react less emotionally. Their words carry more weight because silence surrounds them. Modern culture rewards loudness, but true influence often comes from calmness. A quiet mind notices what distracted people miss. A silent person hears hidden intentions, reads emotional shifts, and understands situations more deeply. Silence trains awareness, and awareness is power. The more time you spend alone reflecting, the more you begin noticing patterns in your own behavior. You start recognizing destructive habits, emotional triggers, weaknesses, and fears that were invisible during constant distraction. This self awareness becomes transformative because you cannot change what you refuse to confront. Solitude forces confrontation, it forces honesty, and honesty is painful before it becomes liberating. Many people avoid silence because they are afraid of what they might discover about themselves, but avoiding truth only delays growth. The strongest people are not those who constantly escape themselves. The strongest people are those who can sit alone in silence and face their own mind without running away. In a noisy world, solitude becomes rebellion. Choosing silence in an attention-driven culture is almost an act of resistance. Every notification competes for your focus. Every platform fights for your attention. Every distraction pulls your mind further away from itself. But when you intentionally disconnect, you reclaim ownership of your thoughts. You regain mental sovereignty. And slowly, you stop becoming a product shaped by external noise. You become someone directed by inner clarity instead. The laws of solitude are not easy. Silence will initially feel uncomfortable because your mind has been trained to depend on stimulation. But if you remain inside solitude long enough, something powerful begins to emerge. Your thoughts become sharper, your emotions become calmer, your intuition becomes stronger, your dependency on validation weakens. And for the first time in a long time, you begin hearing your real voice beneath the noise of the world. Eventually, solitude teaches the greatest lesson of all. Your power was never outside you. It was buried underneath distraction, fear, and constant noise. Silence simply removes what was blocking it. And once a person discovers strength within themselves, the world can no longer control them the same way. That is why silence changes people. That is why solitude transforms minds. And that is why some of the strongest individuals often walk quietly through the world while carrying unimaginable inner power. If this video spoke to something deep inside you, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with someone who needs silence in their life, activate the notification bell, and write in the comments, "My silence is my strength." But there is a darker side to solitude that few people talk about honestly. Silence does not immediately heal you. In the beginning, it often breaks you first. The moment external distractions disappear, unresolved emotions rise to the surface. Memories return, regrets become louder. Anxiety that was hidden beneath constant activity suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. This is why many people quit solitude too early. They mistake discomfort for failure, but discomfort is not failure, it is exposure. Imagine muddy water inside a glass. As long as the glass keeps shaking, the water stays cloudy. But when everything becomes still, the dirt slowly rises and becomes visible. Solitude works the same way. Silence exposes the emotional chaos that was already inside you. And although this process feels painful, it is actually the beginning of clarity. Most people spend their entire lives escaping themselves. They stay busy not because they are productive, but because they are afraid. Afraid of confronting emptiness, afraid of questioning their identity, afraid of realizing that many of their goals were shaped by social pressure rather than genuine purpose. Solitude destroys these illusions slowly. It strips away fake ambition. It reveals whether your path truly belongs to you or whether you are simply following expectations handed to you by society, family, or fear. One of the most powerful things solitude teaches is detachment from performance. In public life, people constantly perform versions of themselves. They adjust personalities to fit environments. They laugh when they do not feel joy. They pretend confidence while feeling insecure. They say what others want to hear in order to remain accepted. Over time, this performance becomes exhausting. A person forgets where the mask ends and the real self begins, but silence interrupts the performance. When nobody is watching, pretending becomes meaningless, and gradually, authenticity starts returning. You begin speaking differently, thinking differently, choosing differently, not because you are trying to impress anyone, but because your actions finally start aligning with your true mind. Another law of solitude is this: isolation reveals who truly cares about you. When you stop constantly reaching out, stop chasing attention, stop entertaining everyone around you, something interesting happens. Many people disappear. Some relationships survive only because of your effort, your availability, or your emotional labor. Silence exposes one-sided connections. It reveals who values your presence and who merely values your usefulness. This realization can feel painful at first, but it is necessary. Because false connections consume emotional energy that could be invested into your growth. Solitude teaches selectiveness. It teaches you to value depth over quantity. And eventually, you stop measuring your worth by how many people surround you. You begin measuring it by the peace you feel within yourself. There is also a hidden psychological shift that occurs in prolonged silence. Your emotional reactions begin slowing down. At first, this seems small, but over time, it changes your entire life. You stop reacting impulsively to criticism. You stop defending yourself unnecessarily. You stop needing to win every argument. You realize that emotional control is a form of freedom. Weak minds react immediately. Strong minds observe first. Silence trains observation. It creates space between emotion and response, and inside that space, wisdom grows. This is why calm people often appear intimidating without trying. Their silence signals emotional stability. They are not controlled by every external stimulus. They are centered within themselves. Society often misunderstands these individuals. Quiet people are sometimes labeled cold, distant, or arrogant simply because they are no longer emotionally noisy. But true solitude reduces the need for unnecessary expression. You stop explaining yourself to everyone. You stop seeking permission for your choices. You stop announcing every plan before it happens. And strangely, this quietness increases your power. because energy that was once wasted on performance becomes concentrated into action instead. Another important law of solitude is protection of energy. Every conversation, environment, conflict, and social interaction affects your mental state. Most people underestimate how deeply external energy shapes their emotions. Spend enough time around negativity, and your thinking becomes heavier. Spend enough time around chaos, and your nervous system remains constantly alert. Solitude acts like a mental purification process. It allows your mind to recover from emotional overload. This is why many people suddenly feel mentally lighter after disconnecting from toxic environments. Their mind is finally breathing again. But solitude is not only about escaping negativity, it is also about building inner richness. A person who depends entirely on external stimulation becomes mentally fragile. They become uncomfortable with stillness because their inner world feels empty. But a strong mind develops an internal life so deep that solitude becomes fulfilling rather than painful. Reading, reflection, creativity, deep thinking, spiritual awareness, discipline, imagination, these things grow stronger in silence. The external world constantly pulls your attention outward. Solitude redirects it inward. And within that inward journey, many people discover abilities, passions, and truths they never knew existed. Some people experience their greatest transformations during periods of isolation, not because isolation itself is magical, but because silence removes interference. Growth often requires temporary withdrawal. Even nature understands this principle. Seeds grow underground in darkness before they ever break through the surface. Muscles rebuild during rest, not during movement. The mind also requires periods of silence in order to evolve. Yet modern culture glorifies constant visibility. People feel pressured to always show progress, always remain socially active, always prove relevance. But not every season of life should be public. Some transformations need privacy. Some growth happens quietly. Some of the most important battles a person fights are invisible to everyone else. Solitude teaches patience with these invisible processes. And eventually, something remarkable happens. You stop fearing silence entirely. In fact, you begin protecting it. You become more careful about who enters your mental space. You become less attracted to loud environments and meaningless conversations. Peace becomes addictive, clarity becomes valuable, and suddenly many things that once impressed you start feeling empty. Attention loses its hypnotic effect. External validation stops controlling your emotions. You realize that many people are trapped in endless cycles of noise because they never learned how to sit quietly with themselves. But you are different now. Silence no longer feels like emptiness. It feels like power waiting patiently beneath the surface. And perhaps the final transformation of solitude is the birth of self respect. Not the shallow confidence people perform online, not arrogance, not superiority. Real self respect is quieter than that. It is the ability to remain loyal to your values even when nobody is watching. It is the ability to walk away from what destroys your peace, even when your emotions beg you to stay. Solitude strengthens this inner discipline because it removes the constant influence of the crowd. Most people do not realize how much their personality changes depending on the environment around them. They absorb attitudes, fears, desires, and behaviors unconsciously. They become emotional mirrors reflecting whatever surrounds them. But in silence, those influences weaken. You begin hearing your own convictions more clearly. And slowly, you stop living reactively. You stop shaping yourself around temporary approval. Instead, you begin building a stable internal identity that remains solid regardless of external circumstances. Another law of solitude is that silence deepens intuition. Modern life overloads the brain with stimulation every second. Notifications, opinions, arguments, entertainment, endless information, all competing for your attention. But intuition cannot speak through noise. Your deeper awareness only becomes audible when the external world grows quiet. This is why many people suddenly receive powerful realizations during moments alone. They finally hear thoughts that were buried beneath distraction. Sometimes, silence reveals painful truths. Sometimes it reveals hidden opportunities. Sometimes it reveals that the life you are living no longer matches the person you are becoming. These realizations are uncomfortable, but they are also liberating because clarity, even painful clarity, is always more powerful than illusion. Solitude also changes your relationship with time. People trapped in constant noise often lose themselves in endless urgency. They rush through life without reflection. Every moment becomes reaction after reaction after reaction. But silence slows perception. You begin noticing details again. You become more present. Your thoughts stop racing constantly toward the future or replaying the past. And within this slower mental state, your decisions become more intentional. You stop acting from panic. You stop forcing things that are not aligned with your path. Patience grows naturally in silence because solitude teaches you that not everything requires immediate action. Sometimes the strongest move is stillness. There is also a psychological strength that emerges when you no longer fear abandonment. Many people are controlled by relationships because they secretly believe losing someone means losing themselves. This fear creates dependency. It causes people to tolerate disrespect, betrayal, manipulation, and emotional instability simply to avoid being alone. But solitude breaks this fear gradually. It teaches you that your emotional survival does not depend on another person's presence. And once you truly understand this, your relationships change completely. You stop loving from desperation. You stop clinging emotionally. You stop chasing people who repeatedly drain your spirit. Instead, you choose connections from a place of wholeness rather than emptiness. This is why emotionally independent people often appear calmer in relations. They value connection deeply, but they are not psychologically imprisoned by it. Another hidden power of silence is invisibility. In a world obsessed with attention, disappearing for a while becomes strangely powerful. Constant visibility weakens mystery. People who reveal everything about themselves become predictable, but solitude teaches strategic silence. You stop announcing every goal. You stop exposing every emotion publicly. You stop explaining your next move before it happens. And because of this, your presence becomes stronger when you finally speak or act. Silence creates weight. It creates anticipation. This is why some individuals command respect without needing loud personalities. Their energy feels grounded because they are not constantly seeking recognition. They learned how to exist without performing for an audience. Solitude also reveals the difference between entertainment and fulfillment. Many distractions temporarily numb discomfort, but very few things genuinely nourish the soul. Endless scrolling, constant stimulation, superficial interaction, these things keep the mind occupied but rarely satisfied. In silence, you begin recognizing what truly gives your life meaning. Creativity becomes deeper, reflection becomes richer. Even simple experiences start feeling more alive because your attention is no longer fragmented constantly. Solitude reconnects you with depth in a world addicted to superficiality, and this depth changes the way you see people. You begin recognizing how many individuals are running from themselves. Some cannot spend 5 minutes alone without needing noise. Others constantly seek validation because silence exposes insecurity they refuse to confront. You stop envying loud confidence because you understand how often it hides inner instability. Real strength rarely needs constant display. It exists quietly, calmly, without performance. Eventually, solitude transforms from a temporary practice into a permanent source of balance. You no longer isolate yourself out of pain. You choose silence strategically because you understand its value. You protect your mental space the same way strong people protect physical territory. Not everyone deserves access to your energy, your attention, or your inner world. This does not make you cruel, it makes you conscious, because you finally understand that every environment shapes the mind. This does not make you cruel, it makes you conscious, because you finally understand that every environment shapes the mind. Every interaction affects the spirit, and every distraction pulls you either closer to yourself or further away from who you are meant to become. In the end, the laws of solitude teach something most people discover too late. Your greatest source of power was never external. It was never hidden inside applause, popularity, relationships, or endless activity. Real power begins when your mind no longer depends on constant noise to feel alive. It begins when silence no longer scares you. It begins when you can stand alone without feeling incomplete. Because the person who has mastered solitude becomes difficult to manipulate, difficult to intimidate, and difficult to break. They carry stability within themselves, and once someone reaches that state, they move through the world differently, calmer, sharper, harder to disturb, harder to control. If this message resonated with you deeply, subscribe to the channel, like the video, activate the notification bell, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and write in the comments, "Silence rebuilt me." Maybe that is the true purpose of solitude, not to disconnect you from the world forever, but to reconnect you with the version of yourself that the world slowly buried beneath noise, pressure, fear, and endless distraction. Because somewhere along the way, many people forget who they are. They become exhausted trying to satisfy expectations that never truly belong to them. They lose themselves inside comparison, competition, and constant stimulation. But silence has a strange way of bringing forgotten parts of you back to life. The calmness you thought was gone, the confidence hidden beneath anxiety, the clarity buried beneath confusion, the strength that never disappeared, only became covered by noise. And perhaps that is why some of the strongest transformations happen quietly. No applause, no audience, no dramatic announcement. Just a person sitting alone with their thoughts, slowly rebuilding themselves from the inside. Day after day, thought after thought, silence after silence. The world may never fully understand these invisible battles, but that does not make them less important. In fact, the quietest battles often create the strongest people. So the next time life becomes silent, do not rush to escape it immediately. Sit with it for a while. Listen carefully, because within that silence, you may finally hear the version of yourself you were always meant to become. And once you discover that inner stability, external chaos loses much of its power over you. People may still criticize you. Life may still challenge you. Difficult moments will still exist. But something inside you will have changed permanently. You will no longer depend on constant noise to feel valuable. You will no longer fear being alone with your own mind. And that inner peace becomes a form of strength that very few people ever truly achieve. If this video gave you a new perspective on silence and solitude, subscribe to the channel and become part of this journey of self-mastery and inner power. Like the video if you felt this message deeply, because your support helps this channel continue creating meaningful content. Share this video with someone who may be silently fighting battles nobody sees, and write in the comments, "Silence gave me strength." Your words may inspire someone else who is struggling in silence right now. Stay calm, stay aware, and remember, sometimes the quietest mind carries the strongest power.